However, what we're seeing a lot of times with what people are calling agentic is pretty much it's sounding a lot of times like automations, or now anything that's an automation or even a classical computer program or anything using any sort of a model is now being relabeled agentic. And regardless of, some of these are actually really great ideas that I think could be great productivity answers and good things in business, but I'm calling foul to let's be a little bit closer on what is agentic and what's not agentic, and that none of that's good or bad, but let's call it what it is, because right now the term agentic means absolutely nothing.
This episode is brought to you by Greenskies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analyst and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Greenskies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Greenskies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell, and today on the show, we have Andrew Clark. Andrew's the co-founder and CTO of Monitaur. Monitaur is for your ML and AI governance needs, and so that is obviously a hot topic for everyone. So if that is an issue at your organization, you talk to somebody, Andrew's fantastic. One of the reasons I absolutely love having Andrew on the show and even just kind of shooting the breeze with him outside of the show is Andrew was also the principal machine learning auditor at Capital One until he was like a legit auditor like us. He was in internal audit and really just kind of fell in love with all this and kind of took it to the next level when he co-founded Monitaur about 6 years ago. And of course, like most of us, he is a classical trumpet player. I don't even know if we should mention that because we all are. But a couple of sources I wanted to point you out to before we jump into kind of topics at hand. A lot of this conversation came from the podcast that Andrew and his team host called The AI Fundamentalist. And so the specific episode was called Agentic AI, Here We Go Again. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, I bet I know where they're going with this. And so I listened, and for the most part, they did. But it is really good. It's a good episode. It's 30-ish minutes. You can skip around, obviously, as you want, based on the sections that kind of make the most sense for what you want to listen to. But it's a really solid listen. I would highly recommend it right after this one or before to give some additional context. But even then, if you want to, they also published an article shortly after called Top 5 Governance Considerations for Agentic AI. Would definitely read this, brush up on it a little bit. You're likely going to start hearing more and more about agentic AI. So in internal audit, we don't necessarily need to be AI or agentic AI experts, but we do need to be able to be conversational around this topic with our stakeholders, with management, the board, all those fine folks. And so at a minimum, in addition to listening to this episode, I would highly recommend checking out the blog that I just mentioned. And then the third resource that I mentioned during the podcast is this YouTube video called Deep Dive into LLMs like ChatGPT. It is 3.5 hours long. I don't expect hardly anyone to watch that, but it is very, very good. I took a look back and I would say just the first 20 minutes, if you just watch the first 20 minutes of that video, you'll get a very good understanding of how these things work. And for all the magic that is LLMs, you'll go, oh, that's all it's really doing. Andrew hits on it. We hit it on it a little bit. All it's doing is predicting the next word. And if some of you are going, well, what do you mean that's all it's doing? Again, watch the first 20 minutes and it'll explain it. Really good. Does not go into a lot of deep technical details. They're sprinkled in, but like whatever, close your eyes, meditate for 15 seconds during those and then move on. You'll be fine. But it is very, very good. And it's I think more entertaining than anything. It's super interesting. Highly recommend it. As you might have guessed, based on the title and the intro, we largely are talking agentic AI. Is it real? How real is it? Is it more of a marketing thing? Are there use cases that make sense? What use cases make sense for internal audit? What use cases should your organization consider, and how to go about those? We also talk about AGI, largely just to get predictions on that. I think I mentioned it in the show also. It's like, it doesn't really matter what our prediction is. It's just kind of fun to talk about, and everybody has one. So that's kind of how we tee up the show. But that's it. It's largely agentic AI, some governance considerations, a few examples of real world agentic AI. And as Andrew points out with his very, very good analogy with GPS, the concepts around agentic AI have been around, been implemented for a very long time. So it does kind of beg the question, is this just marketing spin? I will answer that question. Listen to the episode to get both of our opinions on that. And with that said, here we go. All right. So, do you have any go-to maybe like prompts or AI use cases, if I could say it that way, or anything that you're like, I use ChatGPT for this and I love it because it does this for me? Anything, especially anything relatively novel. So I think we're probably going to use the travel example as we talk agentic.
Mhm.
And I feel like in our already previous conversations, I might even put agentic in quotes there, but we'll get to that later. So how are you using it? Is there anything, again, personally or professionally? I think
Mhm.
the audience and the listeners like either route or one of each. Totally up to you. But like, what is some go-to uses for you that maybe some other people aren't really considering?
I'm probably not the best person to ask that question of because I don't generally use it that extensively, unless I'm stress testing or something. I think where I use it the most is probably like sometimes I use it for changing tones of emails, like kind of rewriting things a little bit. Definitely like spelling check, grammar check. I use it as one of the tools to like help with those things. Or hey, I want to change the tone to be this way a little bit, like. And sometimes with like jam writing a little bit, I'll use it for bullet points and things. But honestly, like I've tried a lot of different prompts, a lot of different tools and trying to like help to create blog posts and things, but I end up spending more time editing than if I just wrote it straight. And also, with my background of the different modeling background and things I have, I usually find it more efficient to use other tools versus trying to round peg square hole using an LLM or something. So if the favorite prompt I'd actually be using, both professional and personal, is probably just really improve writing grammar type stuff. And like usually I just A/B test it and look at the two versions. I'm not even gonna take that one fully, but like, oh, okay, I like that phrasing a little bit. And like take parts from is usually what I would do.
Yep, got it. Yeah, we tried the blog thing as well, and I just
Mhm.
went, this it reads terribly and it's so vague, and I just went, there's nothing meaty enough in here that
Mhm.
like if we're gonna do it, we should just rewrite them, or just write them ourselves. So I think there are obviously tools they're making more specific that are literally like, hey, if you have a podcast, take this, put it into this, it'll spit out a blog for you. Obviously, even then you need to edit it and make sure everything flows nicely and it sounds like you. But yeah, I agree. I've kind of struggled with that one too.
But then that's really not a foundational model anymore, right? So like same with I love Grammarly is my favorite for this, by the way. Like I used Grammarly back in grad school. I love Grammarly. Um as like a tool, but like they were here using BERT and stuff way before foundational. And the thing is they have a team of linguistic people like figuring out how to build the language and things like that. So you're still not using a ChatGPT or something, which is just basic. It's like it's good at nothing, but it's okay at a lot of things, good at nothing, right? So like you're still going to like as you mentioned, people building companies. So they fine tuned a whole bunch with experts around like a blog post. So you're no longer using a ChatGPT, even if it's technically that in the hood. You've now created a more fine tuned model on top. So that's where I just want to like what really somebody give me. I've yet to hear like a really good enterprise use case using a vanilla version. It's usually using modified versions. Well, just devil's advocate, I mean, I think my first audit job, even when I was in college, like that I was doing, I think was using IDEA back in the day. IDEA, audit tool. Bedford's Law was one of the just easy things. You drop in an Excel spreadsheet, it creates that, but it's deterministic programming. So this is where I just keep coming back with some of these things of like, okay, cool, you can kind of get some version of Google Gemini or something to be better at math, but like, why? Like you have other tools that have been around a long time that are very inexpensive, that are very, very good at that specific thing. Why are we trying to square peg round hole versus like large language models, as an example? They're trained to sound human and predict the next word. That's what they're trained to do. They're not optimal. So it's like, sure, you can try and fine tune it and work and make it so it's working pretty well. But also like, hey, there's been audit analytic tools that do this really well for a long period of time, or you can code your own one up very simply because you're a Python guru. Like, so cool. We can get an LM to kind of get us there, but we can also know it's going to work very simply. And it's just a quick script.
So and the reason I like to do it and push for it is, yeah,
Yeah.
Benford's, even when I'll say, webinar conference, I go, who knows what Benford's is? Because most I mean, like Audit Analytics 101 is like Benford's. I
Right,
talk about
right.
it all the time. A lot of people put their hand up, but even then, the ones who don't, or even the ones who do, the question I always get is like, "Hey, I run it, but I don't know what to do with the results afterwards." So then to have basically ChatGPT sit there and you go, "Hey, here are the results. Now what should I do with it?" It go, "All right, now go filter for everything that started with a 12 because you had a huge outlier there, and start scrolling through to see where if you see anything that looks odd to you," or really just similar to how a lot of people use it. We use it like this for just some simple Python scripts, but nonetheless, to be able to spit those out, and me to sit there and go, I don't know what this means. Can you explain this to me? And just the additional context of having effectively a developer sit beside me and be able to answer these questions, as opposed to me having to Google to death to figure out what any given piece of a script means. But so that's why I really like it, is because it can add some additional context and explain, well, this is what a z-score is. And even if it gets really granular enough, and somebody goes, okay, well, what is standard deviation? Like, I see you're using that. And that can be something as simple to you. For standard deviation, it makes a lot of sense. But for a lot of people, it's still, because I asked them, I go, you guys know what this is? And they're like, I mean, I heard of it when I took stats 20 years ago, but no, I don't really know what that means or why we're doing it. So I think that's what I really like about it is, here's the result. Because I know in my as an audit analyst, I would run these analytics, throw them over the fence, and they would go, "This is cool, but I don't know what this means." And so then I have to go sit with them and go, "This is an outlier because of X, Y, Z. This thing is because of this. We found that, and that means this." To be able to have them basically just conversate with some kind of AI tool to give them that is really kind of what we're pushing for.
Yeah, no, I think it gets you about 90% of the way there. It's just for the high precision accuracy. It's sometimes wrong. Like what it defines standard deviation, it might tell you median or something. Like it'll tell something a little bit off, and like it will be close enough for a lot of things. If you don't understand statistics, it probably won't matter. But it just depends on like, yeah, like low risk things. I think it's a great idea for that kind of thing.
All right, so there's our I guess we're already kind of jumping into our agentic spiel a little bit, but let's talk about before that. I just want to get your thoughts. Let's call it your prediction. I think these are almost useless to even talk about, but it is fun to talk about it. So real quick, so we're going to talk agents, of course, but like AGI, tell the audience what that is, as simple as you can explain it. And then any guess in X years you would expect to see it, or I never expect to actually see what that actually is.
Yeah, so it's basically general intelligence of AI systems that can kind of think, and like Terminator or some of these movie things. If you have, or I guess Star Wars or whatever, you start having robots that can kind of do their own thing and think and act like they're human and do their own reasoning component by themselves. I personally don't think we're going to get there anytime soon, if at all. I think the current generation of AI, it's kind of at a dead end right now. We're talking about resurrecting nuclear power plants to get more training data for these things and more power, and no one stopped to think for a second that maybe we're trying to solve the wrong problem. Like, really, how large language models, as we mentioned earlier, are built is to predict the next word. That's currently what it is. There's no reasoning component built in there. Like, we'd have to take a step back and completely change paradigms of how are we like. I'm saying it's not possible. I'm just saying we're not anywhere near that to have a thinking algorithm, because even like deep neural networks, when those came out, it's just having the different neurons firing, like having a bunch of these different synapses, like of your brain neurons, and then showing how you train on data and which one lights up. But it's pattern matching essentially and optimizing over a loss function. And then now we have these just on language. How do I predict over this large corpus of Reddit data, as an example, and Twitter data, and well, now it's X, but it was Twitter, now X is locked down. So Twitter data, how do we predict the next word that a human will most likely say? That's what it is. There's no reasoning component there. You would have to build actual reasoning components in there, and that's kind of above where we are right now. We used to be like building intense rule-based systems and realize that gets very slow to try and do that, but some of those were actually accurate. Now we're at 90% non-hallucination rate, meaning making things up when these are LLMs. And so I don't think we're anywhere near there. It's also like not back in the 50s, everybody was going to have their own flying car in their driveway, right? Like, so we've had these types of things. It's always the same with quantum computing. I think quantum is a lot more imminent than AGI, but it's kind of like next 10 years. It's going to be 10 years, 10 years. Like, everything is 10 years out. I don't think AGI is happening anytime soon. And I think right now the AI industry needs to take a step back and rethink paradigms, because I think we're heading down, like we're not going to get to the level people want. Performance is slowing down. And with the whole DeepSeek, they've essentially tried to do a little bit more of a expert system at times, even though they're not the best system out there. They just found a way to do it more cheaply. I think we need more disruption, or whether this from this group think of just bigger models make it better somehow magically and turn on nuclear power plants. I don't think that's the answer. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But in general, it's trying to make actually reason compute like humans would be AGI.
Okay. And I think that's the big scare. When I first started
Mhm.
looking into that, I went, okay, that's when we're like the 9 to 5 job and the
Mhm.
market is just going to blow up. And I was like, well, okay, what do I need to start being a potato farmer? Because we always need potatoes. Like, I
Right.
went down this, like it's a friend of mine will text me probably about once a week with like, hey, here's this new AI thing, or like, hey, here's this paper on it or whatever. And so somebody else asked me like, how do you feel about AI? I was like, man, one day I feel like this is the greatest, best thing ever, and we're going to be so much better for it. And then I'll read the next article and it's like, we're all doomed and I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm not going to have power to my house and I'm going to owe everything on my mortgage for some reason. The entire, everything is just going to collapse. So, I think AGI was the biggest scare there. And I've seen as early as 2029, I think that's where we have a loose definition of AGI. And then 2050 was one, and then others that are similar, just like, I don't see how it could happen. But, so anyway, there's that. And then I also wanted to share, because you said like, it's just predicting the next word. And there's a really good, I would say, just keep the first 25 minutes of this video. It's 3 hours long, maybe 3.5 hours long. But it's a deep dive into LLMs like ChatGPT. So that's the name of it. It's on YouTube. Again, it's 3.5 hours long. I doubt there's many of them like that, but it does a really good job in very simple terms of explaining how it works, basically how like these LLMs work. And it probably did the best, easiest job of explaining how it does that prediction of anything else that I've seen. So if anyone's interested, what's happening kind of under the hood a little bit, we'll link to that in the show notes also. The reason we're here for this episode is on agentic AI. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast, and it's uh, I don't know who we could attribute it to at this point, but the number of AI leaders, tech leaders, random people on LinkedIn, who are probably created by some kind of bot system, have all said, and I'm sure you've heard it, 2025 is the year of agents, right? Like, it's been said a ton, almost to where it's annoying now to see that. But with that said, again, we've talked about it. I would love your perspective. Agents, what are they? Describe them to the audience in a way that someone who has probably no idea what they are, who just like, yeah, I mean, I kind of know what ChatGPT is, but outside of that, I don't know what's going on. Help them understand what it is.
For sure. Yeah, I want to get into agents a little bit more generally because this is not a new concept. And then I'll describe what the technical definition of what agentic AI is right now, which also is worth noting what people are now talking about, as you said on LinkedIn, which I do think a lot of bots have made a lot of these LinkedIn posts I've been seeing lately, but about what the common understanding pop culture of what agentic AI is not actually the definition that IBM, Salesforce, NVIDIA, a lot of these real large tech companies, they have a definition of what agentic AI is. So I'm going to give that a definition, and then we can kind of analyze and contrast the rest of this episode of like what people are saying is agentic oftentimes I don't think is actually agentic AI. And this is based off of this is not my definition. This is IBM definition, Harvard Business Review. The general definition we have is really it's 4 steps, which is perceive, gather data from multiple inputs from your environment. So you're having an agent is gathering information, and then there's a reasoning component. Oftentimes this is where I call reasoning in air quotes is this LLM. Like we've just talked about what LLMs do, predict the next word, but they've kind of been inserted here as their reasoning now. So you're gathering inputs, you're reasoning, you are now acting on those inputs. And this is the thing that gets a little bit scary from a risk perspective when we got to it is they'll actually start making decisions. They'll do something. They'll go book a flight for you or something, make a decision. And then there's a feedback loop as the 4th step of like, did I do good or not? And kind of go from there. So that's the definition from Harvard Business Review, IBM, NVIDIA, Salesforce. A lot of these folks are putting out these articles. That's the definition. However, what we're seeing a lot of times with what people are calling agentic is pretty much it's sounding a lot of times like automations are now anything that's an automation or even a classical computer program or anything using any sort of a model is now being relabeled agentic. And regardless of some of these are actually really great ideas that I think could be great productivity answers and good things in business. But I'm calling foul to let's be a little bit closer on what is agentic and what's not agentic, and that none of that's good or bad. But let's call it what it is because right now the term agentic means absolutely nothing. It just means using a computer program is essentially where we've gotten to. Um, I think, and there's let me know how you want to unpack that a little bit more. But really, it's those 4 steps is what I would consider what agentic AI is based on the classical definition right now.
Okay. And I'm going to call it a problem for lack of better words, but is your problem with the amount of attention on agents? Is it the marketing side of it or the realistic use of it? Or obviously a combination of both, but what is it that's kind of setting you off more so than the others? Is it like, no, this is not it. Marketers, will you please stop calling it this? Or, yeah, that is what it is, but it's not so, again, it's not going to be the thing that just has everyone on the streets, begging and hunting each other down with sharpened sticks.
That's a very loaded question. It's pretty much all of the above, but I think, I mean, marketing is always this way. Like AI, computer science in general, has the best marketing engine around, and then there's a lot of people that maybe somebody puts out something correct, and then they'll spit it and just kind of misinterpret it, and then it just becomes kind of like lore from there. But I think the two things that are bugging me are first off, agentic AI is not new, and everybody has agentic AI. Everybody has an iPhone or something equivalent right now. So what about Google Maps? What would you call that? So let's think about that. So you're putting in coordinates. I'm at my house. I want to go to the gym, and I put in the gym because I'm a millennial that doesn't know how to drive anywhere without directions anymore, right? So you put that in, and then now it's going to the servers looking at multiple inputs, GPS coordinates, as well as other people's telemetric data from their cars and things that are going to Google. Yes, Google is tracking you when you're using that application. So then taking that information and finding what is the most efficient route for you to go, and then updating it dynamically as that changes, right? And then that's how you go. So we took in inputs, we reasoned, we are executing the instructions, and then we're making a feedback loop. So that by itself, Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever your favorite map tool is by definition agentic AI. So that's not new, and that's using something called multi-integer programming, something that dates back all the way back to like World War II and supply chain logistics and things like that. Of like it, we all know when COVID happened, like how the supply chain got snarled up and things like that. Like there's so much that we just take for granted, like how your packages can get overnighted by FedEx or UPS or whoever. Like all of these things are based on this operations research of like route optimization, all these very fast, efficient algorithms. But they're technically doing that process. Those are just what we've considered traditionally just stats or operations research or just a computer program have now been rebranded. But where I'm calling foul is we've already established. So there's that. We're now saying this concept is new when it's not. And that like somehow these horizontal quote unquote agents are now they're gonna completely destroy SaaS as a business model. But who's hosting it? That's still SaaS. So anyway, like lots of little like factual things that I'm calling foul on. But in generally, like we talked about like Google Maps as how that works as an example. Well, now we're throwing in a modeling system that is to predict the next word, and we're making that the reasoning component. So instead of using a very optimal decision-making algorithm that has been proven and proven time and time again for like route optimization, now we're going to pull that out. We're going to put in a large language model in there versus like, why are we putting that in? That we have SQL queries we've been using for a long time where you can parameterize those and put in like a coordinate and like, so that like even the fact that we want to, I want to interact with natural language. Well, that's not new. And we have ways to solve that too. So this is where, and what's really gets me is there's some recent articles like by IBM and things that are basically saying in the Agentic article, for enterprises that haven't found a way to leverage large language models, Agentic AI is the reason. So I'm like, whoa, but what you guys said a couple years ago about what was good about Agentic, and I'm not trying to pick on IBM, I'm just like, you guys meaning the industry, right? Yeah, just the AI industry. That's exactly what you're now saying Agentic's going to solve. So it just kind of seems like, large enterprises are realizing that LLMs haven't done everything they wanted. They're just kind of productivity tools. They haven't really been able to go that next step like they were envisioned. So we're going to make up a new paradigm, keep the CIOs busy for another 2 years, and then we'll come up with something else and just keep the gravy train going. That's what it just versus like all of that put together. We already have a definition. We have already agents being in place. We have a bunch of misinformation coming around. And then like, what's different? And have we checked the people that are saying agentic AI is going to be the next new thing? Go back 2 years in their LinkedIn if they haven't already deleted it. What did they say LLMs were going to do? And like compare and contrast. That's where I'm kind of, I think as the industry, we need to get a little bit better grounding around.
Perfect. Now, I like the GPS example. You're the first person I had heard say that on your podcast. So a little background also. So Andrew has a podcast that comes out pretty routinely. And so I'd seen it. They were talking about agents and governance and the issues with it. And so I was checking it out and I went, hey, yeah, let's have you back on the show. There's also, so we're going to link to that in the show notes for those that want to listen to it. Pretty quick listen. I think it was like 25, 30 minutes, maybe 27 is popping in my head for some reason.
We try and keep it around 30 or less. Yeah.
Okay. So similar to us, that's usually what we do. And then there's also the blog that followed it up also. So even if you're not a podcast, or if you're just like drowned in podcasts, like pull it up. It's a quick, 5-10 minute read. So we'll link to both of those. But that was the first time I heard the GPS example, and I went, yep, okay, that makes a ton of sense. For me, it was like everything I was reading about agentic AI, and I usually learn from books first, but because of the way things are moving, they haven't really caught up, and the ones that have caught up are all obviously written by AI, and it's super frustrating to come across those after I've usually like $2 on my Kindle, so it's not that big a deal, but nonetheless. But it was all with self-driving cars, and I was like, well, wait a minute. This is supposed to be the latest and greatest thing ever. They've been working on self-driving cars for for years and years and years. Clearly, there's something that I'm missing, and I think it's coming back to your point of what it actually is the reason why it was so confusing to begin with. So I appreciate that. Let's stick with maybe an example that people can relate to a little bit more, and it's one that um, my best friend Matthew McConaughey has talked about during, I don't know if it's a Super Bowl commercial, but it's a pretty, like, it's out there. That commercial runs a lot, but for those that haven't seen it, Matthew McConaughey is sitting at a restaurant outside. It's pouring rain. Opposite him is the other actor from True Detective, whose name I can't recall right now.
I think it's
Um,
Woody Carlson.
Woody Harrelson. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Teamwork. That worked out great. Okay. He's on the other, and things are like great and wonderful where he is. He's not outside, or if he is, he has like a tent over him, and he has exactly what he ordered, and whatever Matthew McConaughey ordered wasn't the right order or something to that effect. I forget exactly, but and then of course to pile it on, truck drives by, hits a puddle, goes over all over Matthew McConaughey. And then I don't know what the tagline is, but it's basically, had I used an agentic AI reservation service, this would not be happening to me. Woody Harrelson did, it did not happen to him. And I saw that use case, when it first came out. It's like, I don't think we're even there yet. But anyway, so the classic travel, and I'll let you spell it out because I know you used it in your podcast also, and I feel like I'm talking for way too long right now. So like tee that up and explain that travel example and the issues that people, the issues that can happen
Easy.
if we stick to that example.
Sounds good. Yeah. And first, props to where props are due. I think Salesforce has done a great, now their stuff is accurate, a great marketing job here. I think they've also, this is where I'm torn on agentic AI, as I mentioned. Like, the idea is great. Like, what people are trying to solve. It's like, how are they actually saying it's being used? Like, is where I'm getting caught up of putting an LLM in there or how it's being branded. But like, the idea is great. Like, having a virtual travel agent. So as an example of let's walk through how that would work. Um, and I'm going to tell like a way of how to do it. And I expect royalties if someone actually builds a startup around this. No, I'm just kidding. But essentially, you're ingesting customer preferences. And also, one more thing to mention about, like, you're saying agents being new and things like, so my PhD is economics. So this one's a little near and dear to my heart. Like, agent-based modeling is something we do a lot. It's been used Federal Reserve, a lot of other folks. Like, agent-based modeling is the core of engineering, where you have the individual and their utility, like what makes them tick. And that's where we're going to talk about in this travel agent example, and optimizing for those and having a lot of multiple agents and how they interact with each other and things. This is not a new field. It's been used for a long period of time. And that's where there's getting I think that's where the name came from here, is probably from at least one of the potential areas it could have come from, is agent-based modeling is a paradigm. But in example, like, let's just say I want to travel to Barcelona, Spain, and I go to a virtual travel agent website, and I want to put, or even going to use Salesforce's agent, right? So I'm going to put in what are my preferences, that help my utility. Say I'm a United Airlines member. I'm just, and then I like Hilton, and so I'm a Hilton Honors member as an example. So I'm putting in my information, putting in my credit card, putting in, my TSA number, all that kind of fun stuff to be able to, my passport, to be able to book this flight. So I'm putting all those inputs in, some kind of like our Google Maps, right? Then I'm feeding that information. That was the inputs from step one. I'm feeding that information into an LLM who I'm asking to reason to figure out the route optimization. Again, we talked about how you could use Google Maps is good for route optimization. There's lots of other tools for route optimization, but we're going to choose an LLM.
And real quick, route optimization, what you're saying is, how do I get from where I live to Barcelona quickest? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. Given my constraints, if I want to use United Airlines, and I want to do it, of course, with as inexpensive as possible, with maybe 2 stops. Also, Google flights, right? Like, you can select how many stops. You can say, do you want descending from price, like that kind of thing. You already have that experience on Google Flights, as an example, for helping you choose. So route optimization means I want to have the least amount of time, and I only want to have 2 stopovers, as an example. Those are my preferences that I'm putting in, and I checked United as the airline I wanted. So then I put that information in, and then the LLM looks at that and says, here are all the flights leaving from, say I live in Atlanta, I'm going to Barcelona. Here's all the flights for this time period that I wanted to go into. That's the other input I had. I want to make sure I'm staying United. I want to make sure it's low cost, all of that information. So those are going in. The LLM is figuring out what's that optimal route travel schedule for me. And I'd say I wanted to be gone 10 days, March 1st to March 10th, 2025. So based on that information, now it has my information, has my credit card number, has my passport, has all that information, my members, my honors numbers and things like that. So it's now going to book all those flights for me. Just book them. And then it's going to send me at the end, here's the flights. Is this good or not? And then me, hopefully I'm paying attention. I don't realize that it's 2026 that they booked for, not 2025, but everything else is great or whatever. And I'm going to say, cool, that looks good. That was the feedback loop. I already told the algorithm it's good, right? So if we really think about that, there's a lot that could have gone wrong there. And also in this example, and same with the Salesforce example, nothing I said there needed to use an LLM. Nothing I said there is not technically something a good software program, and there could even be a good virtual travel agent. I didn't actually look. There could be something out here that already does this. But instead of just having Google Flights, it's just an end-to-end journey where I just put my information in and it books it for me, right? So you think about like the cascading errors that could happen on like, and this is traditional auditor stuff too, is like you have the, input validations and things, that kind of stuff. Okay, let's assume we got that under control. But really, if the LLM comes in with, it says, maybe it puts me in Madrid instead of Barcelona or puts the wrong dates, that's going to cascade errors effect. And we know that LLMs predict the next word not to be accurate. So like, why am I choosing to use something that's not going to work as well when I don't even have that in the front end user experience versus using something like a traditional route optimization, whatever even Google's using on their flights, right? This is where like the concept of agentic AI is great. And I think it could be beneficial for businesses. I think the concept is great, but let's be tighter about what it is. And also, why are we necessarily, now you could need an LLM, but why are we saying agentic AI has an LLM? It's the right tool for the job is what I'm trying to get at. And like, sometimes LLMs are the right tool for the job, but there's a big trend right now that they're the right tool for every job. And I do not think that is correct.
But some of what you've talked about on the podcast is, and you hit on it here, was okay. As it continues to do more for you down that chain of thought, let's call it, or that process of book my flight, hotel. I want to go see. I like cathedrals. The cathedrals over there. So like, book me all that kind of stuff. If you get one thing wrong, then the next step is going to be wrong, and the next step, and the next step, and the next step. And then so even if it is at the very end, because you still have to have some kind of human in the process check to go, yes, that is correct. So for me, like it's at any point where they say, put in credit card info, I always say like, stop it right there. Don't do anything. I don't give it my credit card info, but I say stop there. That's like my checkpoint. So that's an issue in and of itself, is that if you don't get it right from the top, then it's going to bleed down and cause for even greater issues. And then what do you have to do? You have to go back and retrain it, and then hopefully it gets it right, and you have to keep tuning it, right? Speak to a little bit more, because governance and we'll call it AI, ML governance, that's your thing. That's your bread and butter. That's what you know and you guys do extremely well. What about from the governance perspective of that? And you can hit it from whatever angle you want to. What are the issues that are caused there? Because I know you've said, look, most people don't have the AI governance thing figured out yet. Now you're going to multiply that times however many agents you have running throughout.
This is a great segue. And this is where it gets really scary of like, companies don't really know how to, like, they're even mainly we're in SDLC, like software development, like say, we're usually pretty good on our software development now. Machine learning could be a touch and go depending on your company. AI governance, no one's really even figured out foundational too much yet. Some people have, of course, but it's kind of in still nascent stage. So now we're going to say, let's just quadruple, or it's more like factorial, that complexity of, because as Trent, you mentioned, like it's the states, every single state. So it's a state based. So like initially I'm putting my information in, then I'm making a decision. Like those are different states in a journey. This is Markov chains, like dynamic systems. We've had state based systems a long time. Also reinforcement learning. Like let's go back to like AlphaGo. Remember that when it built the game of Go, or even I think Watson, forget the name of it, when it DeepMind or whatever, when it beat chess champion. Yeah, but it's just state-based reinforcement algorithms where like you have so many states. So the governance surface area is massive because you have that cascading error effect. But instead of like traditionally with like ML monitoring, as an example, hey, make sure my inputs and outputs are generally in the same range and they're not drifting. Or if it's a machine learning algorithm, normally you select it's a cat, dog, hamburger, whatever. Like there's a discrete number, or it's between a range of 0 to 100 or whatever for regression. We are now saying pretty much unlimited outputs. So how are you then going to build the monitoring components on top of that? And then also, despite what every marketer is wanting to say right now, agentic AI requires an enormous skill set to build properly. Like I'm talking about Markov chains, the decision properties and things like this. So like, and I'm taking in all this like credit card information, PII, all of these different things, and we're just like put it all in an LLM and just swirl it together and we're good to go. Like there's so many steps to this journey of how to properly govern that, the complexity involved, the multi steps, like that just even forgetting the skill sets of anybody how to do that. Oh, by the way, now these agents have the ability to book flights and do everything for you. So that's segregation of duties, and how do you know that they're not overcharged? Like all of these different states across the whole governance journey have just exploded in complexity, and we have to govern those to be able to go to the next step. Or we can just very simply make, as Google Flights right now has, you put the information in, you choose a flight, and you hit book, and it like what is the value add in doing the McConaughey Salesforce widget thingy versus existing process? And there might be some there. I'm just saying you people need to go in informed is really what I'm trying to do. It's like if you're going to use agentic AI, now there's going to be some awesome companies that can do this really well. Not trying to diss that at all, but you need to come in very informed, and like every single company and every single CIO and CEO saying like, we got to do agentic in our company now and do it everywhere. That's a recipe for disaster. First, it's not going to be performant. Second of all, you're opening a huge risk profile that if you don't have, Google will figure out a way to do this well because they have a great, awesome talent, right? But if you don't have the skills to do this, you're setting yourself up for a lot of difficulties. And I don't think people realize the factorial consequences of this.
And even then, as you were talking about the travel example, even if you set your parameters of like, yeah, this is the cost for my flight, and this is like I only want like one layover or whatever that is. I mean, how many times have like you gone to book a flight and you go, well, they don't have exactly what I want, and maybe this one's is extra $200, but now I can get the other thing that I want instead of that. So there's so much decisions that happen within doing that. It's still not as um just kind of cut and dry of like keep it within this, price range, or keep it within this, like, and then you do have to stop it and then go, okay, well, let me just take over. And that's kind of been my
Hmm.
experience so far. So the common one I've talked about is just like booking a haircut, which
Hmm.
worked great. So I said, here's the website, here's the guy that I use, book it 5 Thursdays from now, and I want it to be between 1 and 3 o'clock on that date. And so it did all that. For the most part, it did really well. There was a weird hiccup with the phone number field where it's just like it could not figure out how to
Hmm.
get it to work because it was looking at the US versus every other, for that +1 or +44 if you're in the UK, whatever, that prefix that you do on phone numbers. And it just like freaked out for like 5 minutes. And I was like, okay, stop. And I put in the phone number. Um, so it did that, pretty well. And so I went, yeah, this is fine. And if I can automate it, to go, hey, next time I have a haircut, just go ahead and you book the next one. You have access to my calendar. You know when I'm going to have the next one. That day, schedule the next one 5 Thursdays from then between 1 and 3. Stop when you get to the credit card spot. Um, I've only done that once, so I haven't had to go back and redo it. My haircut's not until the 13th, I think, of next month, so we'll figure it out. But to me, it's something that I always forget to do. I always forget to book a haircut, and so if it could do that, which I think I can get it to do it, the next try that I give it, to me, I go, yep, this is great. It worked for me for this specific use case. So I think, and I think you made this point too, there are specific use cases, and that is a super low risk thing. Worst case, I text my haircut guy and I go, hey man, my AI total messed up, and he'd be like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but okay. Um, so it is real. I think it's just the level of it is what we keep coming back to, right?
Exactly, and just whereby why we went there as well as like you're saying, is freaking out of the phone field. What you just described, I could write you in a Python program really simply too. So that's like this is the thing of the use case versus how to execute it need to be separated, because like the idea of hey, I just want a service that does haircuts. We could make a whole website and a whole thing about it that could get really good at. It's a cron job. It's a Python script that looks at your calendar and it goes to most places now even have a website if you're using like unless it's some like mom and pop type shop, right? So it's like they could do all that super simply and they're what like but it's not going to freak out over one of the fields. So like you can build all those things. So it's like if that's a new era of SaaS, not replacing SaaS, if we want to call those horizontal agents that don't get tired or whatever people are liking to say, we can do that. But it's none of this like that stuff doesn't require it. And even if you want to do like your as you mentioned the Google Maps or sorry, the Google Flights example, I could build something now to get really creepy, but you could build something that like how does Trent know, like to when you look at flights, what are the other utility items and your preferences? Well, I could be mining all your social media, all of your emails, and understand a little bit more about you and stock you from a cookie perspective and understand what your preferences are and things and build that more economic model to be able to understand what Trent was doing. I still wouldn't use an LLM for that. Don't recommend doing that. It would be very creepy of like a way to do it. But you could even build those more intelligent systems. But again, that wouldn't be an LLM. That's also what Facebook Meta and all those folks do already. They do that kind of stuff about ads. It's always that ad technology that already exists. They're not going to be replacing that with an LLM. But technically, behavioral advertising is agentic then.
Yeah. And so you're saying like you could do it, we could do it, people could do it, but the fact that it doesn't exist, especially specific to like the place where I get my haircut, I was able to do it with an LLM and just saying, here's the website, here's my guy,
Mhm.
5 Thursdays from now, go. And so, yeah, it could be done by others, but I don't know if if it makes sense to invest in a company to do that when, especially, and I'm just talking about Operator, which
Mhm.
is ChatGPT's, and I think Google just launched their thing the other day that does something similar. I don't know, but, and so, yeah, it could be done by others, but it's not being done. And so I do think it does make sense to use it for, something
Mhm.
like that. Because then I can do it. And to book a flight the way that you're talking about, that sounds pretty insane that you're even like, don't try this. It sounds creepy. Don't even try it. But it seems like it would take a decent amount of investment to do that for any one individual. Whereas there's some agentic sense in doing it to go, hey, go book it and get me to this point, and then I'll give you the
Mhm.
thumbs up and you go to the next one. Um, so I think that's where maybe we differ a little bit, or maybe we only had an hour to record this, and so we can't think through to get exactly on the same page. But I am 100% agreement with it is
Mhm.
significantly more marketing than it is real right now. I think there are use cases that do make sense that any individual can do. But like I tried to, I don't know if we were talking about this earlier. I'm on a new accounting software. And so I have to, for the past 2.5 months, I need to take everything from that was in the old one and not move it over, but recategorize everything because the new one that I'm in said, I think it's this, I think it's this, I think it's this. I've already manually done it in the other one to say, nope, it is this, it is this. So I tried to get it and I had a lot of reasons I didn't think it would work, but it was log into this one, log into this one, compare this transaction to this one, take whatever the category is from the old one and put it into the new one. And it failed miserably because that was a little too complex. So I don't think it's going to solve all the world's issues, but I do think there are some pretty decent productivity or just the like. I hate booking flights, so I can't wait until that's real. I mean, I literally have to just tell my wife. She knows I hate it. She's like, just tell me from now on, and I'll just do that for you. So I guess in that sense, either go all in on agents or get a significant other that will do the work for you that you hate doing.
But Trent, I think that's a great example. I think that's where we're aligned is low risk. If it's a low risk, like if they get the haircut wrong, it doesn't really matter. Or like getting you up to the flight component, but it's not purchasing. Remember, a definition of agentic AI that a lot of people are using is it's actually executing. But if it's getting you up to the point but not executing, so those are all low risk productivity enhancements. This is also where we landed with like LLMs. I know I've hit on them a lot this time, but like they're very helpful in certain things and they're great productivity enhancers and help some people do drafting and things like that. Same with I think the agentic AI, like the use case with a haircut. I think that can be a great thing. Or flight if it ends before actually putting your credit card number in. Those are all great use cases that are low risk. What I'm trying to really heighten on did some examples maybe to the absurd around it is for don't think that this is the solution for enterprise problems that are medium and high risk that need humans in the loop, right? That's different. Something that's a high risk pricing for insurance or something like that. That's where I'm calling foul. For things that are productivity enhancing and worst case scenario, you're late for your haircut. I think this could definitely be a great area for that.
Glad to have you on. This was super fun. I've enjoyed it a ton because there has been a lot of the marketing stuff that's been out there. And so as soon as I heard, I don't know, it was within maybe the intro of that episode that you guys did. Within just the intro, I immediately just shot you a message like, "Hey, come on and let's talk about it over here too." So really appreciate it. Fantastic stuff. Appreciate your perspective, especially you have the audit background. You came up through the ML thing. Like you know this extremely well from the audit side, the risk side that you don't really hear a lot of people talking about because it is like let's just push this stuff across um, and get it done. So anyway, I appreciate that. What about anything else that you want? I'll give the stage to you. Is there anything else you want to leave the audience with?
Well, thanks for calling me back. I always love talking to you, both online and offline here. So really appreciated the opportunity to come back. And yeah, I think really we ended in a good spot. If we both agree on like the where it is and there's the let's talk about the bottom part of the iceberg here on like the risks and things and making I'm just trying to get people to make an educated decision on what the risks are. And there might be some areas that definitely make sense. Just like let's weigh the risks and definitely for anybody that Monitaur is an AI governance company, really help with the define, manage, automate journey of where are you in this definition? Are you trying to evaluate with agentic AI? Is this something you want to be using or not? Are you already far in your journey and you need help with your other AI or any type of like, how do you marry actuarial models and AI models? How do you speed up validations? Definitely love to hear from you and drop us a line. And yeah, thanks Trent for having me on.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.